Volcanoes are some of planet Earth's worst serial killers. In fact, during the 20th century, they killed 92,000 people. When human serial killers strike, teams of forensic scientists, detectives, and criminal psychologists determine the past history of these criminals to try to determine what they may do in the future. I am a volcano forensic scientist. I investigate ash deposits from past eruptions to figure out which volcanoes were active in the past, how often they erupted, and how big the eruptions were. Like human serial killers, volcanoes tend to have a pattern of behavior that, if deciphered, can allow us to predict where, when, and how they may erupt in the future. This is especially important to all of us that live here in the Pacific Northwest, where active volcanoes in the Cascade Range lurk in our backyards. For my Ph.D., I studied ash layers in Central Oregon to determine the size and frequency of explosive eruptions in the Oregon Cascades. But to do this, I had to first collect data. I spent 3 months in the desert measuring the thickness of ash layers and collecting over 300 samples. Once I got back to Corvallis, I used lasers to vaporize the ash samples and to figure out their chemistry. Because each volcanic eruption has its own distinct chemical fingerprint, I compared the chemistry of each sample to figure out which came from the same eruption. By doing that, I was able to figure out there were 150 different explosive eruptions that happened in Central Oregon, and at one point they were happening every 2,000 years. That's a small period of time, geologically speaking. But since bigger eruptions that pump out greater volumes of ash tend to be more devastating, I wanted to find out just how big these eruptions were. To do this, I used ash thicknesses from a single eruption at multiple locations to model the three-dimensional shape of the ash deposit and calculate its volume. I found that some of these eruptions produce 13 cubic miles of ash. That's enough to cover the entire city of Corvallis in over a mile of ash. This means that some of these eruptions were 50 times bigger than the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens that killed 57 people. Okay, cool science. But how does this affect me today? South Sister Volcano, which is only 20 miles from the city of Bend, has had ground movement and earthquakes that indicate magma is moving and an eruption could occur sometime in the future. My research has demonstrated that such a volcano has the potential to cause very large and potentially devastating explosive eruptions. However, now that we know what this volcano is capable of, we can better prepare for the worst case scenario and therefore save thousands of lives. Thank you very much.